As the autumn wind of Chicago rattled the windows, Melissa Hartwell sat in her living room, staring at the results of a pregnancy test. 2 clear red lines appeared. This was her first pregnancy. After 3 years of marriage, the moment she and her husband Brian had been waiting for had finally arrived. Brian. Melissa called out her husband's name, unable to contain her excitement. Brian emerged from his study with a puzzled expression on his face. "What's wrong, Melissa?" "Look," she handed him the test. Brian's blue eyes widened, and the next moment he was embracing his wife. "I can't believe it. Is this real?" Brian worked as a researcher at the pharmaceutical company Medicor Research, and was someone who valued scientific verification, but in this moment he was wrapped in pure joy. "We won't know for certain until I have a detailed examination at the obstetrician's office," Melissa's voice was buoyant. "But I'm sure." That night, the two had a modest celebration. Melissa toasted with non-alcoholic sparkling juice while Brian raised a glass of fine wine. On the dining table, several baby product catalogs were already spread out. "When you're pregnant, I absolutely won't let you overdo anything," Brian said, holding his wife's hand. "You should switch to working from home at the accounting firm and focus on your health above all else." Melissa was touched by her husband's kindness. Brian had always been a thoughtful man, but since learning about the pregnancy, he had become even more devoted. At the following week's obstetric appointment, when the pregnancy was officially confirmed, he shed tears while expressing gratitude to the doctor. "The new drug development project at the research lab is entering a critical phase, so I might not be able to accompany you to many checkups," Brian said apologetically. "But I want you to know that you and the baby are my top priority." Melissa showed understanding. She fully comprehended the importance of her husband's work, and his actions showed daily that he cherished their family. After coming home, it became his routine to place his hand on Melissa's belly and talk to the baby. "How was your day today?" Brian would speak to the child in the womb every night. "Daddy is looking forward to the day I can meet you." Every time Melissa saw her husband like this, she thought how wonderful it was that she had married this man. While Brian had the logical and calm aspects typical of a scientific researcher, he was also a man who showed deep love for his family. In the weeks following the pregnancy confirmation, the two were busy preparing the baby's room. Since Melissa had switched to working from home, she had plenty of time during the day to think about the room's layout and choose baby products. Brian would always stop by baby stores after work and come home with something new. "How about this?" One day, Brian brought home an adorable mobile. "The store clerk told me these pastel colors would work for either a boy or a girl." "It's lovely," Melissa smiled. "This child will surely be happy. Being born with so much love." On weekends, it became their habit to walk through the nearby park. When they saw families pushing strollers, they would naturally look at each other and smile. Such daily moments felt more precious than anything. "This time next year, we'll be walking through this park with our baby too," Brian said, putting his arm around his wife's shoulder. "You're going to be a wonderful father," Melissa truly believed this. Knowing her husband's kindness and sense of responsibility gave her confidence about their future together. During the first few weeks after the pregnancy was confirmed, Melissa suffered from severe morning sickness. She would wake up with immediate nausea and couldn't eat anything for days at a time. Seeing his wife's condition, Brian offered to take over the kitchen duties. "I'll think of it like experiments in the research lab," Brian said jokingly while purchasing several nutrition books. "I'll calculate exactly the nutrients needed during pregnancy and create the optimal meals for you and the baby." Brian's cooking was indeed perfectly nutritionally balanced. He carefully calculated the content of folic acid, iron, calcium, and protein, and devised seasonings to make the food as easy as possible for Melissa to eat. He created one gentle menu after another for her weakened stomach from morning sickness: ginger soups, crackers, and banana yogurt smoothies. "I've made a graph tracking your weight changes and the baby's growth stages," Brian explained while showing her a handmade chart. At this pace, you'll have ideal weight gain. Melissa was grateful for her husband's meticulousness. On her own, she might have given in to the difficulty of morning sickness and eaten carelessly. Thanks to Brian's scientific approach, she was able to get through this difficult period. Around the 4th month of pregnancy, the morning sickness gradually began to subside. As Melissa's appetite returned, Brian became even more enthusiastic about cooking. On weekends, the two would go grocery shopping together, walking around selecting foods said to be good for the baby's development. Organic vegetables are expensive, but nothing is too good for you and the baby. Brian chose high-quality ingredients without hesitation. Considering the effects of chemical fertilizers and pesticides, I want to choose safe options even if they cost more. Around this time, Brian also began purchasing expensive supplements. He carefully selected supplements covering nutrients recommended during pregnancy, prenatal vitamins, DHA, and probiotics. This is the latest product that a colleague at the research lab told me about, Brian explained while holding a bottle of supplements. It contains components developed by a Japanese pharmaceutical company that are said to be effective for fetal brain and nervous system development. Melissa was moved by her husband's thoughtful care. Every morning, as she took the supplements Brian prepared for her, she felt truly happy to have married this man. As the 2nd trimester began, Melissa's condition stabilized. Her belly's growth became noticeable, and she could feel fetal movement. Brian looked forward to placing his hand on her belly every night to check the baby's movements. "You're moving energetically today," Brian's voice was filled with tenderness. "Daddy is eagerly waiting for the day I can meet you. I'm preparing a wonderful room just for you." Preparation of the baby's room was progressing steadily. True to his perfectionist nature, Brian introduced one piece of equipment after another that considered the baby's health, from air purifiers to temperature control systems. He even chose wallpaper made from natural materials that used no harmful substances. "I want to provide the best environment for our child," Brian said with a serious expression. "Not just our love, but I want the physical environment to be perfect too." After the 6th month of pregnancy, regular checkups became more frequent. However, Brian's work became increasingly busy, and opportunities for him to accompany her to checkups decreased. The reason was that the new drug development project had entered a critical phase. "I'm truly sorry," Brian repeatedly apologized. "But if this project succeeds, my position at the company will be stable. It's for you and the baby's future too." Melissa showed understanding. She knew her husband was working hard thinking of their family's future. The checkup results were always good, and the baby was growing steadily. While it was lonely to go to the hospital alone, thinking of her husband's efforts made it something she could endure. In the 3rd trimester, Brian's return times became even later. Sometimes he would come home close to midnight, but he never failed to place his hand on Melissa's belly and talk to the baby. "Daddy worked hard for you today too," his voice was tired but filled with love. "I'll be able to meet you soon. Daddy is really looking forward to it." On weekends, Brian would care for Melissa without showing any fatigue. He would give her massages, accompany her on walks, and take care of all necessary shopping, showing even more consideration than before she was pregnant. "You're doing enough," Brian said gently. "I'll do anything I can, so please don't hesitate to ask." As the 9th month of pregnancy arrived, birth preparations reached their final stage. Brian had prepared everything with the thoroughness of a researcher: hospital contact lists, luggage needed for hospitalization, and even emergency response manuals. However, his work busyness only increased. He regretfully told her that he couldn't accompany her to tomorrow's regular checkup due to an important meeting. "I'm truly sorry. But after this meeting, things will calm down a bit. I'll definitely be by your side during the birth," Brian promised while holding his wife's hand. Melissa nodded. Now that she had reached full term, labor could begin at any time. The checkup day near full term was a chilly November morning. Melissa went to the hospital alone. Brian had been preparing for an important meeting until late the night before and had left early for work that morning. Another checkup alone today. Melissa felt a bit lonely as she drove. During the pregnancy, Brian had only been able to accompany her to checkups the first few times. While she understood the importance of his work, with the birth approaching, her desire to have her husband by her side had grown stronger. The hospital waiting room was bustling with many pregnant women as usual. Melissa checked in and sat in a chair to wait her turn. Looking around, she noticed that many women were accompanied by their husbands. The young couple sitting next to her were looking at ultrasound photos and talking happily. "We might find out the gender next time," the husband said, putting his arm around his wife's shoulder. "I'm so excited," the wife smiled happily. Melissa placed her hand on her own belly. Her large belly, now nearly full term, occasionally gave her strong fetal movements. The baby was growing healthily. That should have been enough to make her happy. Melissa Hartwell, she heard a nurse call her name. Entering the examination room, Dr. Richardson, her attending physician, greeted her with a warm smile. In his late 50s, he was an experienced doctor who had worked as an obstetrician at this hospital for over 20 years. "How are you feeling?" Dr. Richardson asked while reviewing her questionnaire. "Thanks to you, I'm feeling well. The fetal movements are active, and sometimes I wake up at night from being kicked," Melissa answered with a laugh. "That's a sign of good health. Now, let's perform the usual ultrasound examination." Melissa lay on the examination table and lifted her shirt to expose her belly. Dr. Richardson applied gel with practiced hands and placed the ultrasound probe on her abdomen. The baby's image appeared on the monitor. Growing steadily, the doctor initially explained in his usual calm voice. "You have 2 weeks until your due date, but the baby could be born any time now." Melissa looked relieved. Like previous checkups, this one seemed to have good results too. However, when the doctor began changing the probe's angle for a more detailed observation, Melissa noticed his expression gradually changing. "Let me change the angle and check once more." Dr. Richardson's voice carried a slight tension. The doctor repeatedly changed the probe's position, observing the fetus from various angles. He stared intently at the monitor image, occasionally operating the computer keyboard to take measurements. His concentrated manner began to make Melissa anxious. "Is there some problem?" Melissa asked hesitantly. "Please wait a moment," the doctor's voice was clearly disturbed. "Let me also check your blood test results, just to be sure." Dr. Richardson took out her chart and began examining the blood test data in detail. During this time, Melissa's heart was pounding violently. In previous checkups, he had never spent this much time examining things. She could see the doctor's hands trembling slightly. Why was a veteran doctor with nearly 30 years of experience so shaken? Melissa's anxiety reached its peak. "Doctor, what exactly?" Melissa asked with a choked voice. Dr. Richardson slowly turned around. His face was pale, and his hands wouldn't stop shaking. "Melissa," the doctor's voice was heavy and serious. "Leave this hospital immediately and file for divorce." "What?" Melissa thought she had misheard. "What are you saying? Why would I need to divorce?" Melissa's voice was trembling. "There's no time to explain." Dr. Richardson stood up and quickly pulled out part of her chart. "This will make it clear." What the doctor handed her was a detailed analysis of blood test results. Several chemical substance names were listed, but Melissa couldn't understand them. However, the words, "abnormal values," and "high concentration detected," jumped out at her. "What test results are these?" "Drugs that would normally never be detected have been found in your blood." The doctor's voice was filled with anger and sadness. "Moreover, at quite high concentrations, indicating levels showing continuous ingestion." Melissa's mind went blank. Drugs? She hadn't taken anything except prescription medications. "Look at the ultrasound image again," Dr. Richardson pointed to the monitor. "The shadows you see around the fetus, these shouldn't be there. Staring at the screen, there were indeed thin shadow-like objects around the fetus. Melissa didn't know what they meant, but from the doctor's serious expression, she could understand they were definitely not good. These drugs, the doctor continued with a trembling voice, can interfere with pregnancy and potentially cause serious effects on the fetus. Fortunately, the baby appears to be in no immediate danger, but I don't remember taking any such drugs, Melissa desperately denied. That's exactly the problem, anger flared in Dr. Richardson's eyes. These drugs can only be obtained by medical professionals. Moreover, this appears to be intentional administration by someone who understands what would happen if these were given to a pregnant woman. Melissa's blood drained from her face. Medical professionals. Brian was a pharmaceutical company researcher. What is your husband's occupation? The doctor asked with a stern expression. He's a pharmaceutical company researcher, Melissa's voice was hoarse. I see, Dr. Richardson nodded sadly. Melissa, your life and your baby's life are in danger. Leave here immediately and go to a safe place. You should also contact the police. Melissa packed her belongings with trembling hands. The reality she didn't want to believe was gradually becoming understandable. Her beloved husband was trying to kill her and the baby. Moreover, cunningly, gradually, under the mask of love. Doctor, will the baby be okay? If you stop taking the drugs immediately, the effects on the baby can be minimized. But it's crucial that you get to a safe environment as quickly as possible. Melissa left the examination room. As she walked down the hallway, various memories came flooding back. The expensive supplements Brian had prepared for her. The perfectly calculated meals. And the fact that he had never once accompanied her to checkups. Everything was beginning to make sense. In the hospital parking lot, Melissa sat in her car, stunned for a while. Then she made up her mind. She would absolutely not return home. To protect her baby, she would go to her parents' house immediately. Melissa drove toward her family home with trembling hands gripping the steering wheel. An hour had passed since leaving the hospital, but her mind remained confused. She couldn't accept the reality that her trusted husband had been trying to poison her. When she arrived at her parents' house in suburban Chicago, her mother Carol greeted her at the front door. Seeing her daughter's pale face, she immediately sensed something was wrong. Melissa, what's wrong? You look terrible. Mom, Melissa collapsed crying in her mother's arms. Help me. Her father James also rushed from the living room. As a former police officer, he immediately understood the seriousness of the situation from his daughter's condition. What happened? James's voice was calm, but anger burned in his eyes. Melissa explained the events at the hospital to her parents. The blood test results she heard from the doctor, the abnormal shadows on the ultrasound, and the meaning of Brian working at a pharmaceutical company. Her parents listened to their daughter's story in speechless shock. I can't believe it, Carol covered her mouth with her hand. He seemed like such a gentle boy. The gentleness was an act, James's expression was grim. Melissa, stay here tonight. First thing tomorrow morning, I'll request an investigation from a private detective. The next day, James contacted Mike Thompson, a private detective he had known for years. Mike, a former FBI agent, was known as a skilled detective handling everything from adultery investigations to corporate crimes. This is an emergency. My daughter's life is in danger, James explained the situation over the phone. Mike immediately began his investigation. He started by examining Brian's behavior patterns. Interviews at his workplace, questions to neighbors, and most importantly, a background investigation. 3 days later, Mike brought a shocking report. James, prepare yourself for this, Mike's voice was heavy. Brian has had a mistress for 2 years. Moreover, that woman is also currently pregnant. Melissa, who was listening to the report in her parents' living room, once again found herself unable to accept reality. the mistress's name is Amanda Cooper. She's also in the medical field like Brian. Mike produced photographs. 5 months pregnant. That means she became pregnant when Melissa was 4 months along. Why? Melissa's voice was hoarse. Why would he do such a thing? Mike opened his investigation file. Further investigation revealed an even more terrifying fact. Brian was intentionally administering fertility drugs to Melissa. Fertility drugs? Carol cried out in surprise. More precisely, drugs that suppress ovulation and make it difficult to maintain pregnancy. This includes experimental drugs being developed at the pharmaceutical company. Mike's explanation continued. His plan was to cause Melissa's pregnancy to fail, then use the emotional shock to push for divorce. James clenched his fists. And he intended to keep only the mistress's child. Exactly. According to materials seized from Brian's computer, he had created a detailed timeline. Mike showed them printed documents. Miscarriage for the wife, followed by divorce due to emotional shock. Then remarriage to the mistress. Melissa looked over her blood test results again. The detailed data the doctor had given her clearly showed multiple chemical substances detected at high concentrations. These drugs, Mike explained the technical terms in understandable language, can inhibit fetal development and in the worst case, cause miscarriage. However, Brian made a miscalculation. A miscalculation. Melissa's constitution showed strong resistance to the drugs. Normally, miscarriage would have occurred in early pregnancy, but the baby miraculously survived. This matched the doctor's explanation. The shadows around the fetus on the ultrasound indicated abnormalities in the amniotic fluid due to drug effects. There's sufficient evidence. James stood up. I'm calling the police. The next day, Melissa went to the police station with her father. The evidence they brought included blood test results, the plan discovered on Brian's computer, and photos and communication records showing his relationship with his mistress. Detective Sergeant Davis, the officer in charge, immediately requested an arrest warrant after thoroughly reviewing the evidence. Assault, violation of pharmaceutical laws, and possibly attempted murder, Detective Sergeant Davis explained with a serious expression. This is clearly a premeditated crime. That evening, Brian was arrested at his workplace. The sight of him being handcuffed in front of his colleagues was prominently featured in the local newspaper the next day. The headline, "Pharmaceutical Company Researcher Arrested for Administering Experimental Drugs to Wife," sent major shockwaves through Chicago's medical industry. Medicor Research immediately fired Brian and suspended all related research projects. The company's credibility was irreparably damaged, and stock prices plummeted. Meanwhile, when the case came to light, Mistress Amanda Cooper immediately began denying her relationship with Brian. I was deceived by him, Amanda testified through tears. I was told he was already divorced from his wife. I had no idea he was doing such horrible things. However, investigation revealed that Amanda also knew part of Brian's plan. Messages exchanged between them contained content like, "I'll be able to leave her soon," and, "You and the child are my only family." Brian was interrogated in detention. Initially he denied the charges, but faced with overwhelming evidence, he finally admitted to the crime. I fell in love, Brian said with his head down. I wanted to start a new life with Amanda. But if I divorced, I would lose a lot of money in the property settlement. So you tried to kill your wife? The investigator coldly pressed. I didn't intend to kill her. I just thought if she naturally miscarried, the emotional shock would make her agree to divorce. However, considering the types and amounts of drugs used, it was clear that Melissa's life had also been in danger. Expert analysis proved there was a high possibility that continued administration would have serious effects on the mother as well. The case was widely reported, and Brian became nationally known as the wife-killing researcher. He was permanently banned from the medical industry and would never be able to work in research again. Melissa decided to spend the remainder of her pregnancy safely at her parents' home. The drug effects were gradually eliminated from her body, and the baby continued to grow steadily. Freed from days of fear and despair, she was finally able to prepare for childbirth with peace of mind. 3 months later, Melissa safely gave birth to a healthy baby girl. The baby, named Emily, was born as a vigorous child weighing 3,200 grams, completely unaffected by the drugs. Dr. Richardson, who attended the birth, whispered, "It's a miracle," with tears in his eyes. "This child is truly strong," the doctor said, gently holding Emily. Protected by her mother's love, she overcame the difficulties. As Melissa held her daughter to her chest, the previous fears seemed like a lie. The sensation of tiny hands gripping her finger was proof of the most precious life. 6 months later, Melissa returned to work as an accountant. She rented a small apartment near her parents' home and began a new life as a single mother with their support. A routine was established where her mother Carol would care for Emily in the mornings, and Melissa would pick her up in the evenings. "This child is such a good baby," Carol smiled while bouncing her granddaughter on her knee. "She looks just like you did when you were little, Melissa." Balancing work and childcare was never easy, but Melissa felt fulfilled. While she was sometimes exhausted from midnight feedings, seeing Emily's smile made all the hardship worthwhile. Meanwhile, Brian's life was completely ruined. Convicted of assault and pharmaceutical law violations, he received a 5-year prison sentence and was currently serving time in state prison. Immediately fired from medical research, he was permanently banned from the medical industry. All his pharmaceutical company experience was erased, and he would never be able to work in research again. Mistress Amanda Cooper also abandoned Brian immediately after the case came to light. She began dating another man and decided to put her child with Brian up for adoption. No one visited him, and Brian was completely isolated. "He got what he deserved," James said while reporting to his daughter. "He's learning firsthand the weight of the crimes he committed." Melissa rarely thought about Brian anymore. Sometimes she wondered why she had ever loved such a man, but she focused more on her future with Emily. When Emily was approaching her first birthday, Melissa received an invitation from Dr. Richardson. The doctor invited mother and daughter to a small party at his home. "You two are special to me," Dr. Richardson said. "Please let me watch this child grow." Touched by the doctor's kindness, Melissa felt the mystery of life. The light that appeared in her darkest moment had now become like family. One day, while playing with Emily in the park, Melissa reflected on the events of a year ago. Without that terrible checkup day, she and her daughter might not be in this world now. The doctor's courageous decision had saved 2 lives. "True family isn't determined by blood relations alone," Melissa murmured while watching her daughter. Emily laughed innocently while gripping flower petals in her small hands. As the sunset beautifully illuminated the park, Melissa felt grateful from the bottom of her heart. The importance of nurturing and protecting life. That true love means genuinely wishing for the other person's happiness. And that no matter how difficult the situation, if you don't give up and face it, a path will open. The moment Emily first said, "Mama," tears overflowed from Melissa's eyes. This small being was the greatest treasure of her life. She was convinced that all the painful experiences of the past had led to this happy moment.